Welcome to the Low Post. I'm Eric Stark, joined by my co-host Mike Gross. The well-tanned Mike Gross come back from his vacation at the beach. We've got some good sports topics for you this week. We're going to get into the Phillies, who seem to be on a vacation themselves, Mike. They've let the rest of the division come back to the pack with them a little bit here. They've come back to the pack, I should say. And they're in a struggle. It seems like everybody's slumping right now. They have a 42-35 record, and it's interesting. They've lost 4 straight series since they swept the Braves back on June 8th. What's wrong with these guys?
Well, they just haven't hit lately, and you go through stretches like this in a baseball season. It's a long grind. You play every day, and right now they just haven't hit. The last 7 days, they're last in the major leagues in batting average, slugging percentage, on base percentage, and runs scored. And you're going to hear lots of nonsense about situational hitting and clutch hitting, and they're just not hitting. The last 7 days, I mean, they're 10 in the month of June. They're 10-10. 5 of those losses are in the last 7 days, and they just haven't hit. Now, the thing that is, I think, maybe a little bit of a cause for concern if you're a Phillies fan is do they have some guys in the lineup who are overmatched by really top quality pitching? If we're thinking about the playoffs, if we're thinking about October, I think that has to be a little bit of a concern.
What about the concern of Chase Utley? This guy was MVP type numbers at the beginning of the year, and I still think he could finish that way. Is this struggle he's going through? At one point was 0 for 23. He's coming out a little bit. He had a day off Saturday. Should this be a big concern, or is this just a blip on the radar screen? This little slump he's in.
Well,
right now?
it's a big blip, but I think it's just a blip. It looks like his timing's off. He's either out in front or he's behind. He's a very hard worker who I think has a very, very good understanding of hitting and what he needs to do. So, and he's a great player. So I think that's just one of those things that inevitably happens in baseball.
I see our producer's getting a Mets hat ready on top of a camera back here, Paul Franz being a New York Mets fan. And it's interesting as the Phillies have struggled a little bit here, the Marlins are 1 game behind them now, Mike, and the Mets are 4 and the Braves are 4.5. Yeah, he's throwing a hat. I'm not going to catch it. No, you're looking on Stanford.
Not even going to soil ourselves with that thing.
No, we're going to do the stat of the week later on in the show, but one of the stat weeks I could do is Willie Randolph, $3.5 million he took away not to be coaching the team. It was probably the best thing for the Mets. I mean, this is a guy who let the inferior Cardinals beat him a couple years ago in the playoffs, collapses last year, and now this year they were struggling. I was hoping as a Philly fan that they would keep Willie Randolph as long as possible in New York. Look out for the Mets now, Mike. What are your feelings with the rest of this division right now?
Well, it probably was a good time for them to make a change. I'm not sure if any of it was Willie Randolph's fault, but just clearly kind of a toxic atmosphere in that team right now, and you had to change it, and so they changed it. But the Mets are potentially a good team, but they're also an old team, a team with a lot of limitations in terms of their rotation, a team with a lot of guys who are near the end, frankly. I mean, Carlos Delgado, people like that. So I just think the Phillies are clearly a better team than the Mets.
Do the Phillies need to make a pitching move here? I mean, we see in the paper today that there's some possibilities. CC Sabathia, Roy Oswalt, some names have been out there. Do they need another starter? Where do they need to get some help for this?
Well,
team?
They certainly could use another starter. There's no question about that. It would be a great thing, and it would be interesting to see what ripple effect that would have through the rest of their pitching staff. Would they move Myers to the bullpen? Maybe they would, and maybe he'd be more comfortable there. Although their bullpen has been great, and you could argue leave well enough alone. But I don't buy that, because I think if you can get better, you get better. And also, it's hard to believe that their bullpen, as it's currently set up, is going to continue to be as just seamlessly good as they've been. So it wouldn't hurt to give them a jump, a shot in the arm. But it's going to be real tough for the Phillies to acquire a big name free agent starter, because they just don't have the farm system to the prospects to trade.
You mentioned ripple effect. Here's my transition. I get what do you call me?
You are the king of segues.
Thank you, the transition guru. The ripple effect. What's the ripple effect in golf with Tiger Woods being out? What kind of an impact is that going to have? We're going to switch topics a little bit now. The ripple effect I see with Tiger Woods being out, the man played with one leg and won the U.S. Open. They couldn't beat him with one good leg. One little stat I want to throw out your way before I get your opinion on Tiger and his missing from action. When he went in that playoff with Rocco on Monday, on June 16th, the stock market sold 70 million less shares during that playoff in the afternoon. And also, that TV rating got an 8 share in the middle of the afternoon. That's equivalent of like a 15 share during prime time. This guy was money for golf. What's it going to be like with golf not having a golden boy there?
Well, if you have money invested in golf, then you're sad right now. There's no doubt about that. But really? But most of us don't have money invested in golf, and I'm tired of people saying that it would be this routine assumption in a lot of the coverage of sports. This routine assumption that it would be a horrible thing if sports got a little smaller and a little less popular. I think most sports would do well to get smaller and less popular. I mean, golf is going to be hurt. How is it going to be hurt? Of course it's going to be a little less entertaining because this guy is so phenomenal. He's just off the charts brilliant. But, it's like people saying, well, the NBA's in deep trouble because their TV ratings are down. What? In trouble how? What does that mean? I think we get way carried away with that in the sports media.
I think, I tune in for golf a lot just to watch Tiger. I will admit that. He was phenomenal to watch. And a lot of these times, there was a tournament this last weekend, and on their leaderboard, I think I recognized one name. I don't know. But I will say this will be a chance for people to other people to maybe emerge. Maybe Phil Mickelson steps up now. Maybe some other guys, some other household names, some other names become household names. I'm trying to say. So maybe it's a good thing. And if Tiger comes back next year, look out. But it is going to have an impact.
There's no question that there are a lot of people like you, Starkey, that aren't going to follow the sport if Tiger's not around. I mean, that's not what I'm saying.
No.
But the idea that sports have to bring in fans who don't really understand it in order to be deemed successful, that's an annoying assumption to me. I'm tired of that. I don't think there's anything wrong with sports getting a little smaller. No big deal.
There will be an impact, though. You will admit that.
Oh, right? There's absolutely no question about it. I'm sure there was this past week with the tour event last week in Hartford. I'm sure their ratings were horrible.
What's the impact that Curt Schilling has had on the game of baseball? Transition. He's had an injury that might be career-ending now. He's a little bit older, and he's going to have surgery, I think, on his what was his rotator? What was his surgery on?
Yeah.
Just yesterday. We're filming this on a Tuesday. He had surgery on a Monday. Is he Hall of Fame? I mean, this is a guy who he wasn't a multiple Cy Young winner. He wasn't. I think he made three times made 20 wins in a season. But he had a great postseason record and great postseason numbers. He's got 3 World Series rings. Mike, is this guy going to the Hall of Fame?
Well, let me give you some numbers on Schilling that I think are interesting. Career winning percentage 596, better than Steve Carlton, better than Bob Gibson.
Wow.
Career ERA 3.46, which is about a run a game less than the league average during his career. His ERA is better than the league average during his career by a greater margin than Gibson, Seaver, Carlton, Koufax.
Wow, that's impressive. No.
And postseason, 10-2 with a 2.23 ERA and 130. This is a key number here. 133 innings. Baseball has changed a little bit in the recent era with the wild card, with 3 rounds of playoffs, now with one out of every 4 teams makes the playoffs in the major leagues now. So we have to think a little differently, I think, about the game in terms of the relationship between the regular season and the playoffs. And maybe players need to be judged a little bit more on their postseason performance than they have been in the past. And by that criteria, I don't think there's any question that Curt Schilling is a Hall of Famer.
So often we will judge somebody for coming up short in the postseason or not coming up in the clutch. They have great regular season, but when they really need to do it for the championship, we talk about the Charles Barkleys, the Patrick Ewings that don't have the rings and so forth. Or I'm trying to think in baseball.
A-Rod, Barry Bonds, people say.
Okay.
But basketball and baseball are so different.
But I'm just looking at guys that maybe didn't come up as much, and they didn't. Here's a guy that when the spotlight was clearly on him, he came up and shined the most for his team. He had 4 complete games in the postseason, 2 shutouts. I mean, that's impressive.
And again, I want to go to that 133 innings. It's a big enough body of work that it isn't a fluke. Sometimes we people talking about baseball get ridiculously carried away with judging guys based on 20 at-bats or judging guys based on 4 or 5 starts for a pitcher. But this guy's got an extensive body of work in the postseason. Remember how he pitched for the Phillies in the 93 Phillies, which was relatively early in his career. Again, I think the way we have to think about players in this era has changed a little bit, A, because of the offensive standards of the era, and B, because of this expanded, it's more of a playoff sport than it used to be. And I think both of those things, if you look at them in context, I think really are in Schilling's favor.
You go back to 93 when he was playing in the postseason for the Phillies. Impressive what he did. Terry Mulholland was the ace on that staff. Schilling really came on and kept the streak going in that series. I mean, he just became a different pitcher during that Braves series. I think it was a game in Atlanta, actually, when he first came on.
He seemed to have almost like a football-like ability to get psyched and fired up for huge games.
He had some huge games against the Blue Jays in that World Series as well. And it became a different Curt Schilling. The following season, he carried that over. He became the ace of the Phillies. But that metamorphosis sort of started during that postseason. And the confidence was there. And he carried over with the Diamondbacks with the World Series, and then 2 of them with the Red Sox.
And at the very end of his career, for most of his career, he was a guy who threw 95 miles an hour and threw strikes. Mm-hmm. So it was a pretty simple way to go about pitching. But the power pitcher, who was also a control pitcher, he would have to be considered, I think, one of the top 10 of all time in that sort of specific criteria, in addition to the other things that he's got going for him.
Very good. We didn't do the stat of the week yet. I think we're going to end the show with the stat of the week.
Lay it on me. Starkey.
Set me up. Here we go.
Here's Starkey with this week's...
The stat of the week is 11. The amount of losses the Baltimore Orioles have on Sunday baseball games. Can you believe that? How many? So the season's not even, we're not even at the All-Star break yet. They've lost. Don't go to an Orioles game on a Sunday is what I'm trying to tell you. They lost again against Milwaukee. 11 losses on Sunday this year, folks. Not very good.
One of these days on stat of the week, Starkey, you should just give the number and then just say, good night, we'll see you next week. Just give the number with no context at all. That would be my advice to you, Starkey.
And then do I give the answer the next week, like a teaser to bring them back to watch our show?
Or even just kind of a Zen thing. That's what I'm thinking.
I think that's what Phil Jackson does sometimes. He'll just walk in and say 92 and walk out.
That's what I'm talking about. Exactly. Okay. Exactly. Now you're thinking right with me.
All right. And hopefully you guys are thinking right along with us, and you'll join us again next week from the Low Post. I'm Eric Stark. For Mike Gross and our producer Paul MacGyver France, we'll see you again from the Low Post.